Polcheninoff, and welcome to Sure Things. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to many of our hearts, especially in these uncertain times. We all have that question and concern about money and our finances. So today we're going to address some of those topics. I'd like to welcome today Craig Bernard. Hi, Craig.
Good morning.
Welcome from
you.
Madison Financial Planning.
Yes.
So I wanted you on today to just give us some information, especially during these times when people are wondering about where we're going, what's the impact on the economy, and what kind of planning we can do as we move ahead. So I'd like to start by just having you tell a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I've been in financial services for about 35 years now, and just originally got into the business I wanted to figure out what I could do from a career standpoint where I can make a positive impact in people's lives. And 35 years later, I can really say I thoroughly love what I do. And every day I have an opportunity to talk with clients, and I think the big thing is it's not necessarily telling clients what to do, but more from an education standpoint. I feel like it's my job to let them know what their choices are, positive aspects, disadvantages, so ultimately they can make an informed decision. I don't want to tell someone what to do. I want them to make their own decisions.
Excellent, excellent. Given today's times too, and I know we're going to talk about financial planning in general, but specifically about today's economy with everything going on. What are your thoughts? You know, positive, negative. What do you think about what's going on?
It's very interesting. So I guess I can give a little bit of background where we are as far as the economy, and we have to fold in COVID. So if you go back to mid-March, and if you looked at how the economy was doing, we're growing at about 2 or 3%. But the market had done phenomenal, really up about 30% that previous 52 weeks. The fact is, it was ahead of itself. So the market trades on either fundamentals, which are facts, or emotions. Well, during that period of time, the emotions that it was trading on was greed. It really should not have been where it was. And so there's always going to be some event to sort of bring it back down to reality. We just didn't know it was going to be a pandemic.
Is that what they call correction then, when you say bring it back to reality? Is that term?
So there are a couple of terms. There is a correction. It generally means when there's about a 10% loss in market value, and then a bear market, which is about a 20% loss. And actually, after March, we had the fastest drop into a bear market ever. It was about 19 days. You know, now we can look back, and it's really, in a short period of time, we've regained that. So not only did we have the fastest drop, but we had the fastest rebound ever. So it's just, I find it fascinating.
So it sounds like it's positive then. We're in a positive.
What was positive is that the economy was strong coming into this. So inflation was good, earnings were good, employment was good, and that helped. That wasn't enough. So once the pandemic hit and we had an idea of what that may do to the economy, we knew we're in a recession. It was both the monetary policy and the fiscal policy that helped stabilize. So it was the stimulus that we had, and essentially the Federal Reserve moving interest rates back down to zero.
So that's how we stand now.
Now,
we're also coming up to the election. A few weeks away. Historically, have there been certain trends that follow an election?
There are a number of trends and things that we do take a look at, and it's interesting. We've gone from questions I get from clients about the economy and the pandemic. We're talking a lot about the election right now. And so we look at it from different standpoints. One is, what are companies that are either going to benefit or hurt depending on who gets elected? And clearly the focus is on the presidential election, but we know it's not just that. That's going to affect the economy. We look at both the House, the Senate, and essentially how that may be divided, or if one party ends up winning all of it. So I'll tell you, the calls that I'm getting are pretty interesting. And it has been different than anything I've ever seen.
So what would be an example of a call that?
Yeah, so
concerns?
the example is, I want out. If so-and-so gets elected,
Okay.
I want out. And we are so polarized right now.
Okay.
And so I have to talk some people off the cliff and sort of remind them about the long-term focus of what they should be taking a look at. And the fact is that no matter who may be elected as president, we're still going to get those Amazon deliveries. And so it's about the companies. Clearly, it may have a difference as far as who's in office, but I have to remind them a long-term focus, and it's really the emotions that I have to protect my clients against, because that's where the mistakes take place.
That's where they,
Yeah.
that is so interesting.
Yeah.
So you are getting those calls.
Yeah.
I like that you talk about that view, that long-term view. Let's pull back and see where it's going. That's
Yeah.
interesting. When you talk about your job as a financial planner,
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a bit about that for people that perhaps don't use a financial planner
Sure.
or aren't familiar with some of their services. I wonder,
Sure.
could you give us a little bit of a background on what a financial planner would actually do?
Yeah, glad to.
Yeah.
So a financial planner, I think that term is used pretty broadly.
Yeah.
There are individuals who are in financial services don't necessarily have the professional title of a financial planner. So I'm a certified financial planner, meaning I have education, I have passed tests, and I have experience to practice in this field. The fact is that everyone can benefit by talking with a financial planner. And everyone may have different types of needs. It can be very focused, maybe on taxes, or someone's ready to retire, they're not sure what to do with their benefits, or it can be much more comprehensive. And it's really a function of fact-finding, goal setting, implementation, and then making adjustments along the way.
That's interesting. You said just what I was going to ask you. Is
Yeah.
this for everyone?
It really is. It's not only for everyone, I think that it's for everyone at any age, and I think it's also for anyone based on whatever their economic status is. So if someone's just starting out, give them an idea of things that they should be thinking about, and actually each step along the way. Yeah.
That again is what I was going to follow up with too, because I really wondered about the services and then when to use it. Because I know in my case, it really wasn't until I was thinking about retirement
Sure.
that I thought, okay, perhaps now I better start, which maybe I shouldn't admit that, but that's when I
Yeah.
started really thinking about getting my ducks in a row.
Right.
Was
Well,
at that point.
It's actually pretty typical.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times people will think, well, maybe I should, look into this or start thinking about this. But typically, it's not until someone is pretty close because, early on the focus is we've got the kids, we've got their education. It's pretty much everyone else first before it's us. And then you get to the point where maybe the kids are done with school and you're getting closer to retirement. It's generally, most people, it's about that 10 years just prior to retirement where they really start thinking about it a little bit more.
Right.
So.
That's an interesting part too, right? It
Yeah.
is about that time. If somebody was going to look for a financial planner, are there certain questions, certain things that they should think about or ask
Yes.
when they're exploring that?
They really should. So I am a CFP, which is a certified financial planner, and you can actually go to the website and there's a list of questions that you can ask someone. But the fact is that in my field, it's sort of broken up into two different areas. One is just someone that may go to a brokerage firm if they're looking for investment advice. And those individuals actually have to work on what's called a best interest basis. So meaning that if they're going to make a recommendation, they have to look at whether someone's age or risk tolerance before they make a recommendation. On the certified financial planner side, we actually act as fiduciaries. So it is a different level of due diligence that we have to provide before we do make recommendations.
So so those would be things that they would think about as they're looking towards that.
Definitely.
And the questions they would ask. Are there certain questions that you...
Yeah, I mean, I think whether it's working with any financial professional, yes, I think anyone would want to know, their tenure, how long someone's been doing this. I think they want to know, obviously, what they're going to maybe be charging for their services or how they're compensated. So, again, if I go back on the brokerage side, if someone's thinking about making investments, if they're just what we call transactional.
Yeah.
So what are they paying if they're buying something or selling something? And again, in that situation, there's always a question about if you're recommending something, whose best interest is that in? So how they're compensated, if they're compensated on an hourly basis, or if they're compensated based on investments that they're managing on someone else's behalf. So I think they'd want to know affiliations. So if someone works for a company, or if they have their own business and they work for their clients. And so, and I guess really just trying to get an idea of how they work with someone, what kind of communication they have with them on an ongoing basis, and what kind of communication the client actually wants. Someone may say, I want to talk with you, once a quarter, or they may want to talk with them once a year. I would hope that someone has the availability to contact someone anytime a question arises. And I encourage that. Before someone makes any financial decision, I'm like, please call me first.
That's good.
Because I don't want to necessarily have, after the fact, someone made a decision that may not have been in their best interest that we can't change.
Can't rectify. Well, we're going to talk more about some questions that people have sent in about financial planning and finances in general, as well as some questions about other events that you might have been part of as well.
Okay.
We'll be right back after this break.
Hey, let's check out this park. Oh, wow, that's really cool. To find a great local park or forest near you, go to discovertheforest.org.
Hi, welcome back. We're here today with Craig Bernard. Hi, Craig.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Of Madison Financial Planning. So we were talking a bit about, in general, going to a financial planner. And I did want to ask one question. I think we kind of talked about it. Is it for everyone?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that was a quick answer.
Very much so.
Right. Okay, and we talked about how, depending upon the stage of your life, that might be. You might have a different focus at that time.
Very much so.
Very much so. I did have a question about the stock market, because I know that is also an area that people look at, and there are a lot of questions from average people that don't participate in the stock market. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I think everyone at any age, once the foundations are in place, once they have money in savings, so it's they have sort of a cushion in place or emergency funds, because there is a process. I wouldn't want anyone to just jump right into the stock market without making sure that they've got adequate reserves set aside. And there are really some things that we want to make sure they take advantage of before they essentially start their own savings and investments. What I mean by that is, so outside of just regular money in savings or checking where they've got access to that, we want to make sure that I want to make sure that they don't have a high level of debt. That should be a focus, making sure that that gets repaid. I want to make sure that if they've got access to a retirement plan, especially when they've got a match through the employer, they take advantage of that. Then we can start to look at what they do after that on their own. And to some extent, they should have at least some exposure to the stock market. So their choices are what we call fixed income or bonds or stocks. And stocks are where they're going to have a chance for appreciation. Yes, there is risk associated with that, but it's what we talked about a little bit earlier. It's got to have a longer term focus. So again, it's when you say access to the stock market, we just sort of forget. We have to get back to the basics. It's a market of stocks, not necessarily a stock market. And so that means they're individual companies. And so if somebody wants individual companies, I say start with what you know. You know, if you're getting those Amazon deliveries every day, well, you're supporting their stock price. You might as well take advantage of that. So you can do that either on an individual basis, or you can use mutual funds, and gives you a little bit more diversification. But again, at all ages, you should have some participation, because the fact is that, as we say, let's say we're thinking about retirement. If the normal retirement age is 65, average life expectancy is at least mid-80s. And so what happens is that, you know, if they're lucky enough to have a pension or they're receiving Social Security, good chance they may not be getting any type of cost of living increase. So imagine working for 20 years and never getting a raise. It's not going to work, because you have inflation. You know that you're going to be spending money on services and products that are going to go up in cost. So what you do, buy those companies.
That's such an interesting perspective on it, too. It's interesting you mentioned Amazon. I had a friend who got into Peloton right as COVID struck. So they got into that stock and they did very well. But I like your message as far as making sure that everything else is accounted for. Your emergency fund, your savings, you know, you're on that road.
Yes.
So then this money, or for the average person going into the stock market, would be a little bit on the side, not necessarily what they're banking on for their livelihood.
Correct.
Right?
It's like anything else. It's building a strong foundation. And you know, if I talk with someone and let's say that they had maybe a not so positive experience in the past of being in stocks, they just may not have had the right focus. If it's more speculative or trading, I'm just not a fan of that. Generally, I think if you can buy some good companies and hold them, you're going to do a little bit better. But there are some things you can do to protect yourselves. There are things called stop losses, which you can pick your threshold of pain. You can have a stock and say if it goes down 20%, you're out. So those are some safeguards to some extent that we can build into that process.
I was going to ask, or I might have already asked about, is it ever too late to plan?
It's never too late or too early to plan.
Okay, good. Right.
So, you know, at each step, if somebody is just starting out again, I love it if they start early. I love it when my clients refer their kids to us because they tell them they wish they had started something earlier. But again, at any age, generally, again, just before retirement, they're thinking about, let's do some planning, let's do some projections, anything I need to change. But even clients, I've got clients well into their 90s, and at some point besides saving for the retirement, their focus generally would transition into estate planning, which we also, again, recommend at an early age. So those are some of the basic estate planning documents we might discuss, things like wills, power of attorneys, healthcare directives.
So those are also very important for somebody at that age bracket, somebody of the older Americans, which that's really important to think about. You can't be too young or too old.
Correct.
When you talk about getting ready for retirement, what is the normal focus of somebody coming in? So 10 years before they say, okay, we really need to have this plan because I want to be out in 10 years?
Yes.
Or is it 10 years?
I think 10 years is very appropriate. And again, there's probably not action until we take till maybe a year beforehand. But again, you want to plan, and we can make some projections because it's hard to catch up. If the longer you wait or the closer to get to retirement, you don't have as much time. Where if you start earlier and you know that you're not necessarily on track, and if you have the ability within your budget, you can save more, obviously the sooner the better.
Can I just ask, given that, and especially thinking of how people know what people know about financial planners, because I didn't know a great deal either before I started looking into it. I always thought, and this is probably my own I didn't have that lack of knowledge of financial planning, that you had to have a certain amount of money in the bank before I went to a financial planner. If I don't have all this rules of money, what is that person going to say to me?
Yeah.
Is that true? Is there, or can anyone go in and say, look, this is what I have, here's my goal, can you help me?
Yeah, I think it's more a function of not necessarily what you have in the bank now, because that's something we can help with. So if they don't have money in the bank, essentially, again, like most people, generally they end up spending more than they make.
Yeah.
And so they come to us to help, even just with basic budgeting. And somehow they just lose track of what they have in savings or what they have to work with, and a lot of times they just need something in black and white.
Right.
Just to say, okay,
and you
well,
can help with that.
Yeah, if this is their goal. So whether it's to have a certain amount in savings, or let's say they want to save for a car, a trip, again, we can help.
You can help
from that standpoint.
And that alone is great information for people as well, because as I've said, I had a narrow understanding of who would go to a financial planner.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that it's with budgeting or taxes or estate planning. There are all those different areas to look at.
Definitely.
I did want to talk a little bit about college planning.
Okay.
Because we have our folks that are also looking ahead to that, or perhaps they're just about ready to start that.
Yeah.
In these uncertain times with everything going on, what would be your best advice for those young people now planning for their children for college?
Yeah.
Is it a 529? Is it, the stock market? What would it be?
Yeah, it's a good question. So really we can start with projections. So, if we are lucky enough to start as soon as someone's born, we actually can say, let's give a couple scenarios. Based on their age, we can look at maybe going to a state school or a private school. We know the cost today, and we can build in an inflation. So we have an idea of what this total cost may be in the future. Generally speaking, what we do is what we use where 529s are fantastic. So those are a way to save for education if we know it's specifically going to be used for that purpose. Those are accounts that grow on a tax-free basis, and as long as the monies are used specifically for education, it's tax-free when they come out. It's really different, though, the way that we suggest someone invest those monies from what we do in retirement. So for retirement, we generally have a very long period of time that we're saving money, investing it. Then you get to the point you retire, and you're going to be in retirement, I said, potentially for 20 years. It's potentially a very, very long period of time. But even with retirement, generally speaking, you have monies that are in savings and investments that you're taking an interest from. You're not going into, hopefully, the principal. The difference from an education standpoint is we know that when this student is 18, they're going to start to use the money, and essentially there's a complete liquidation over a very short period of time. Right. So unlike retirement, where you can stay in the stock market for a long period of time, you don't have that same ability with a 529. So we have a shorter accumulation period, and we have a very short distribution period. So it's really in the earlier years, we can be in the stock market to have a potential to get a higher rate of return. But as we get closer to needing those funds, we have to become a lot more conservative. So they're invested very, very differently. Okay?
So it still could be an option, the 529.
Definitely.
Or part of the portfolio for those young people. Saving as that goes.
So, a lot of times what happens is the discussions that we have with clients, we do make those projections so they have an idea of how much they should be saving. But then they wonder, should we have all of the money there? What if they don't go to school? And maybe it should be in savings. And so it's a combination of 529 and the money's outside of there.
And outside as well.
Yeah.
So you could see mainly a combination on that.
Definitely.
Yeah. Oh,
Definitely.
Good to know. Also, people looking ahead with taxes for the tax season. You would be able to give them, or a financial planner would be able to give advice on how to get ready for that.
Yes.
Because that's always, with the different tax laws, it's been kind of a bumpy road to get to know what's under the belt there.
So when you mention taxes, it could be income taxes, it could be estate taxes. So it's important to know that a financial planner is not an accountant. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a CPA. I'm not an attorney. I don't practice law. But we know the impact of taxes on a portfolio, and we know what someone should be looking at. And really where a financial planner is helpful, I believe, is where they act as sort of the glue with the clients and their other professionals. So I'm generally working with my clients, CPAs, and their attorneys to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as our clients' financial goals are concerned. So I can take a look, and there are some recommendations that we can make to help possibly reduce the tax liability. And again, it could be individual income taxes or even estate taxes.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I know that I have so many more questions that we didn't get to, but I want to thank you for answering some of those.
Okay.
If you could leave with just maybe 2 big points for people to think about during these economic times, what would they be?
I would say that with anyone, don't let your emotions be foremost in your decision making regarding your investments. That's the mistake that I see clients make. So for instance, this recent downturn in the market, it's scary. I mentioned it's the, coming in, we were doing so well earlier this year, and just everybody thought things were going to stay wonderful forever, and we immediately transitioned to things are never going to get better. And so it's those period of times where people potentially can come out of the market at the worst times. The fact is that on a particular day, the days that we've had the most appreciation happen during what we call a bear market. It's when the market's down 20% or more. So if you get out, you never had a chance to have your portfolio regain what it lost. So be careful of those emotions.
Emotions, that would be a big point. Well, again, I want to thank you, Craig Bernard from Madison Financial Planning, for joining us today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today, and please, I encourage you to go to Craig's website. There are a lot of free resources there and information that could help you as you think about your finances yourself. Take care until next time. Goodbye.